Percy dreamed he was somebody else, somebody who was wearing the lion's pelt as a cape, and was pulled along by a small girl through a grassy field at night. "Hurry, he'll find us, he's too strong," the girl said, sounding worried. "There's no need to be afraid, little one," Dream Percy said in a deep voice. "I have slayed every monster I have faced." "You don't understand. Layden is too strong," the girl said. Then they stopped behind a rose bush. Then the girl pulled a pin from out of her hair. "Here, take this, make of it a weapon," she said. When Percy took the pin, it magically grew into a sword with a rather familiar grip on the hilt. "The sword is called Anaklusmos," the girl said. "It belonged to my mother, Philione, who was a child of the ocean. The current takes one by surprise," she continued, "and before you know it, you've been swept out to sea." Before he could thank her, there was a trampling sound nearby. "It's too late! He's here!" the girl shouted. Then Percy felt something nudging at his shoulder. "Percy! Percy, wake up!" It was just Grover. "Percy, it's morning. The train stopped." They climbed out of the cars, and Percy pulled out his pen. He thought about the sword in the dream. Anaklusmos. That was the Greek word for riptide. In the dream, it was a hairpin, but to tell by the feeling of the hilt, Percy was sure it was the exact same sword. And that girl in the dream, he never did get a clear look at her face in all that darkness. But he had the slightest idea that the girl was Zoe. As they walked down a road nearby, Percy mentioned to Grover about how Apollo told him to find Nereus in San Francisco. There was something else nudging in the back of Percy's mind that he still wouldn't talk about how the general would keep Annabeth alive until the winter solstice. That was Friday, and only 4 days away. Not too far from the train tracks was a small town called Cloudcroft in New Mexico. The good news was that there wasn't too many people around and there were some options for food. The bad news was that there were no options for a ride to get further where they needed to go. They were probably regretting that they ditched the van now. Grover spotted a coffee shop and Zoe followed him to get some food. Dahlia went down the street to see if there was anyone who could give them directions. Percy wondered if that was an excuse not to go anywhere with Zoe, or to get away from him, 'cause she was possibly still mad about the talk with Luke yesterday. That left Percy alone with Bianca, just waiting by the grocery store. This was the first time Percy had been completely alone with Bianca, and it felt kind of strange, especially now that she had become a hunter. Percy was never comfortable talking one-on-one with girls, but the silence was getting weird now, so he made conversation. "So, you like being a hunter so far?" he asked her. "You're not still mad at me for joining, are you?" she asked him. "Nah, just as long as, you're happy," Percy said. "I'm not sure if happy is the right word with Artemis gone," she said. "But I feel much calmer now, and it feels like everything's slowing down. I wonder if that's the immortality." Percy realized she had a point. Years from now, she would still look as young as she was the night Artemis blessed her, and wouldn't age another second. Who knows? Maybe long after Percy already lived his life, she'd still be around hunting monsters and helping other demigods, and she would still look as young as she did today. She would always look 12, and she would never die unless something or someone had successfully killed her. "Nico didn't really understand when I told him," she said. "He'll be all right. The camp takes in plenty of kids," Percy said. "They did that for Annabeth when she was only 7. "I hope we find her," Bianca said. "She's lucky to have a friend like you." "Yeah, sure, a lot of good it did her," Percy complained. "Don't blame yourself, Percy. That was seriously brave of you to try to save us at the school. If we hadn't met, I wouldn't have felt okay about leaving Nico at the camp. I figured if there were people like you there, Nico would be fine. You're a really good guy, Percy." "Even though I knocked you down during the camp game?" Percy asked. Okay, except for that part, she giggled. Percy realized it felt easy talking to Bianca, and he liked it. Much better than talking with stupid Zoe, anyway. So, where did you guys go to school before, anyway? Like, before Westover, he asked. She explained that they were in a boarding school in D.C., which she couldn't remember the name of, and a lawyer would check on them every once in a while. She also said that she was told her parents were dead, and she and Nico never knew either of them. Then, they stayed in a hotel for a few weeks, and then a new lawyer came and brought them to Maine, and that's when she and Nico went to Westover. That was a really strange story to Percy, but then again, every demigod story is strange. I just wanted the chance to know what it was like not to be a big sister 24 hours a day, she continued. I know it's selfish, but that's really why I joined the hunt. Percy could relate to that, considering the fact that he had discovered he had a Cyclops for a brother during the summer. So, what were you guys talking about before? Percy asked. The night you left, that is, with you and Zoe in front of your cabin. How did you... She was cut short when Zoe and Grover came back with pastries and drinks. That might have saved Percy's butt just for now. Grover gave Percy his muffin while he chewed on the wrapper. The muffin was so good, Percy easily ignored the look Bianca was giving him. We should try the tracking spell again, Zoe said. Grover, do you have any acorns left? I think so, Grover said. I just need to... Then the pictures of the birds on their coffee cups sprang to life and flew off the cups. Grover passed out and collapsed on the ground. Hey, what's wrong with Grover? Thalia asked. Don't know, Percy said. He just collapsed after the picture on his coffee cup came to life. Grover wasn't completely out, but he sort of lost his mind. We better get out of here, Thalia said. That's when the skeleton warriors appeared on either side. This time, they were carrying handguns. The kids brought out their weapons, though they weren't sure how they'd be any good against guns, but they had to try. Percy realized there were only 4 skeletons, so where was the 5th? Then, one of them pulled out a radio and made a clicking, chattering noise with his teeth. He must have been informing the leader, and soon the general would have a trace on them. It's near, the gift from the wild, Grover muttered. We should take them one-on-one, Thalia said. There's 4 of us and 4 of them, not counting Grover. Hopefully this way they'll just ignore him since he's down. Agreed, Zoe said. Gosh, that's a new one. Zoe shot some arrows and Thalia threw her spear, but they all just flew right through the skeletons like they were ghosts. Percy raised up his sword and charged. As the skeleton pulled the trigger and the first bullet fired, time seemed to slow down, and Percy could feel the bullet's path like the current of the sea. He dodged the bullet, separated the skeleton from his legs, and kicked the gun away. Then, without warning from behind, bang, boom! Percy was shot in the back twice. Percy! Thalia cried. But Percy wasn't wounded. There wasn't a single scratch. It was the coat. It still had the Nemean lion's invulnerability, and it saved him. As Grover hugged a tree, Bianca took out her hunting knife and stabbed another warrior right in the chest. Then it erupted into flames until it disintegrated into nothing. How did you do that? Zoe asked. I don't know, a lucky stab? Grover finally snapped out of his trance. The gift! It's here! He said. Then, from down the street, came a big, scary, brown, bad, ugly, snotty, squealing warthog. It ran down the road and whipped the remaining skeleton warriors off their feet and sending them miles away. It's the Erymanthian boar, Zoe yelled. It's the gift, a blessing from the wild, Grover shouted. The boar turned towards Grover, but Percy pulled him out of the way right before he could get squashed. Oh yeah, I feel blessed all right, Percy said. It's trying to kill us. How is that a blessing? Bianca asked. It can't help itself. It's wild, Grover said. Then the boar went for Bianca, but she surprisingly jumped out of the way in time. Percy was pretty surprised to see how fast she really was. Then Thalia made the mistake of raising up the Aegis shield, and the boar squealed in outrage. It was probably more pissed off than freaked, because it got ready to squish her, but then Percy pushed her out of the way, and they ran for the woods. They ran down a train track, and the boar was right behind them. It seemed to have trouble running, and it did. Its hooves just weren't meant for snow. They kept running until minutes later they stood right on the edge of a trestle bridge which stood over a 70-foot-high gorge. Quick, the shield, Percy said. Together they slid down the hill on the Aegis shield like a snowboard. But the boar was still right behind them. Except the boar didn't have the same luck as they did, because then it tripped and started rolling down the hill like a barrel until it reached the bottom with a big poof. The two demigods stood there in front of the boar as it remained wedged in the snow. It didn't seem hurt, but it wasn't going anywhere. Then Grover and Zoe and Bianca appeared. Now's our chance to use it, Zoe said. For what? Thalia asked irritably. And how can we be sure this thing is a blessing? It's our ride west, Grover said. You have any idea how fast this boar can travel? Fun, Percy said, like pig cowboys. We better get on quick, Grover said. I sure wish there was more time to look around, but it's gone now. What's gone? Percy asked. Ignoring the question, Grover hopped on the boar's back, took out an apple, played his pipes, and the apple floated over the boar's nose. The boar went nuts trying to reach for it left and right. Automatic steering. Good thinking, go boy, Thalia said. Percy looked over at Zoe. You have any idea what he was talking about? This wild blessing? Of course, Zoe said. Didn't you feel the breeze back there? It was the presence of the Lord of the Wild. The presence of Pan. Percy should have guessed that, due to the info that came from Grover. They kept on riding until the boar pulled to a stop next to a little oasis in the desert. This is as far as he'll go, Grover said. We better get off while he's kept busy. They all slid off, and immediately the boar ran back towards the east. Then they noticed not too far away was a big, endless pile of cars and other scrap metal. A junkyard? In the middle of nowhere? Anyway, Grover fished out 5 acorns, threw them in the sand, and the acorns magically arranged themselves in a pattern which didn't make much sense to the others. They're representing us, Grover said. And that little scrap of metal there next to him? That's trouble. A monster? Thalia asked. Don't know. I don't smell anything, Grover said. But the acorns never lie. I think it has something to do with that junkyard. They all decided they were too exhausted from today's challenges, so they decided to save the next one for the next day. So they set up camp for the night and rested right there in the desert.